Thanks, Klaus. It's great to be here in Finland. I actually come to Helsinki with some regularity to work with growth stage companies, and I love the city. Just too bad the weather is a little nasty. Not a good walking day today. I'm going to talk to you about machines, man, and medicine, why psychology and sociology are more important than technology. And you might think this is a relatively audacious thing to say from a chief medical officer from one of the largest technology companies in the world. But the simple fact is that without the general will or the individual capability to use technology, technology is irrelevant. So at Philips, we're in 100 countries. We have a global vision. We are striving to use innovation to make the world healthier and more sustainable. And we have an audacious goal as well of impacting the lives of 3 billion people by 2025. Like you, like many of you in the audience, we're creating new solutions to make healthcare hopefully more efficient, effective, and equitable globally. But we also know we can't do this alone and we need your help. So why do I think that psychology and sociology are more important than technology? Can I prove this to you over the next 20 minutes? Let's start out by saying there's nothing more powerful in the world than the collective desires of human beings. And this collective desire forms the imperative for change. From the standpoint of psychology, we know that humans are both evolutionarily prepared to do certain things and can learn others. This provides the capability for change. So what you need for wide-scale, impactful, and meaningful change is the general will of the people, the sociologic imperative, the individual ability, and the tools to use. Without these three things, there is no wide-scale societal change. If there is no general will to change, then individuals work in isolation with technologies, and they never connect the dots for large-scale change. If there is the general will or the sociologic imperative to change, and there are tools available, but individuals are not competent to use them, there cannot be large-scale change. And lastly, if there's the general will or desire to change, to use new tools, to make something like healthcare better, and individuals stand ready to use these tools, but these tools are not available, obviously there can be no change. This has actually been the situation that we've been in until recently. We've known globally that healthcare should be more efficient, effective, and equitable. Individuals, I believe, are evolutionarily prepared to care for themselves and use tools, but until recently we haven't had the tools available to do this. That's because the digital revolution is occurring right now as we speak. So what's the sociologic imperative driving change? If I say that these two things are necessary, these three things are necessary, what is the sociologic imperative? In order to understand the sociologic imperative, you first must understand authority and power, because authority and power are everything. Our species might have persisted without these two social instruments, but we would not likely have progressed. These two are like drums beating in the background of civilization. One, a staccato rhythm that we willingly tap our feet to, and the other, a bass drum that's intermittently struck with such force that we feel the vibration and are compelled to move. Every industry has created and controlled its market by establishing authority. But authority is not the same as power. Authority implies consent, and power implies the use of force or coercion. Consent from customers in other industries gives companies the right to sell. Consent in healthcare gives healthcare providers the right to treat. It's obviously difficult to use power in most industries. You can't force people to buy things. And in healthcare, it's neither ethical nor legal to force individuals to receive care or change their behaviors. And therefore, the ability to establish authority and obtain the consent of individuals is crucial, if not essential. This is a picture from Stonehenge, which you probably recognize. And the reason I show this is that this is an example of what's called post and lintel construction, also called trabeation. So posts supporting lintels, or pillars supporting lintels, vertical and horizontal. This was the primary load-bearing form of construction up until about the 3rd century BCE worldwide, until the arch came along. And if you look at most of the recognizable temples in the Middle East and in Greece and elsewhere, this is how they were constructed. Over the past 100 years, healthcare was constructed globally in the same way. The $9 trillion lintel of healthcare delivery sitting on what I like to call the 4 great pillars of medical authority. These pillars are informational. The concept that I, as a healthcare provider, have knowledge you can neither access nor understand as an individual, as a layperson. Technical. I, as a healthcare provider, have technology you can neither possess nor use. Moral. I, as a healthcare provider, have the moral authority to deliver care. I might not be infallible, but I am better than you. You can't do it yourself. And lastly, scientific. This concept that the precepts on which we base the delivery of medicine no longer exists in the minds of shaman and witch doctors, but is based on empiricism and trial. This is how we built healthcare, on these 4 pillars of authority globally. But here's the thing. For the first time in a century, there are cracks in the stones, and 3 of the pillars are eroding. Informational. Medical information has been democratized. It's estimated that over the last several years, 1.6 billion people have accessed healthcare information online. The information that I got when I was in medical school, you can now get on WebMD or MayoClinic.com. And it's just as good as what I had. The pictures are better than the ones I used to look at from the back of the classroom. Technical authority. The fact that you're at this meeting should not require that I explain that technology has become democratized. People are placing all manner of things on their bodies and measuring innumerable others for their benefit. And moral authority. Since the 1960s, globally, we have sort of understood that traditional structures of authority may not work as they should, and that in healthcare, that physicians aren't priests or magicians, and that people die in hospitals and clinical trials fail. 3 of the pillars are eroding. And the fact that this is true creates a sociologic imperative for change. What is our psychologic capability? This is a slide with 30,000 dots. It may be difficult for you to see. Each dot represents 100 years, a century. This is 3 million years. This is a period of time during which our genus, Homo, of Homo sapiens, has been on the planet. This arrow points at 1 dot in the corner, 1 100-year period of all these periods, all these tens of thousands of generations. This is the only time in the history of our genus that some external, extrinsic force has managed our care. All the other time periods before that, the 2,999,900 years before, we did it ourselves. I believe that we evolved, and evolutionary psychologists would agree with me, we've evolved the desire to care for ourselves. It's a trait that encourages fitness. And over the last 100 years, we've blunted that desire. Now, we weren't very good at it. We sucked, right? Because we had no information and no technology, and we didn't feel that we had the moral authority to do this. But those things are changing. A few hundred years ago, a farmer on the Great Plains of the United States or in eastern Finland was very, very concerned and involved in his own health care. If he was injured or sick for 2 weeks, a small child could starve to death. If he was injured or sick for several months, he could lose his entire family and his life. Now, he wasn't very good at it, but he was very engaged and did what he thought he could do. Homo sapiens has evolved a drive to care for herself. We've blunted it over the last 100 years. This is our psychologic capability for change. What are the technologies that will allow us to capitalize on the sociologic imperative and our underlying unmet desire to care for ourselves? Here are a few examples. Through the Philips Health Suite offering, we have a number of technologies that are harnessing the Internet of Things to provide unique and integrated solutions for individuals, and other companies are doing similar things. UGrow is a set of products we use to help manage babies and their parents for the first 1,000 days of life, crucial for development and then beyond. Sonicare, a connected toothbrush that actually measures your ability to effectively brush your teeth and gives you coaching and 3D feedback and can transmit those images to your dentist if you desire. Dream Family, a set of solutions, connected solutions that actually encourage adherence and compliance in patients that are struggling with sleep apnea and related disorders at home. Aging Well, a set of devices and connected technologies that can predict falls and prevent falls and can decrease ER visits and hospitalization by more than 20%. And finally, intensive ambulatory care monitoring. We've done this in partnership with a number of health systems, both in Europe and the US, and we've shown up to 40% reduction in costs for those living at home with serious chronic conditions and up to 50% reduction in ER admissions. The technologies to capitalize on these things are available. We and others have also launched products and solutions to try to prevent illness and to ameliorate the risk for illness. Ours is a set of personal health programs and connected solutions to do this as well. So we're working across the continuum of care with our clients and their patients and with you to try to make healthcare more equitable, efficient, and effective globally. In order to do this, we all must collectively embrace the sociologic imperative to change, the will of the people, collectively to change, empower individuals to care for themselves as they wish to, and to continue to create the tools to allow them to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roy. Chance for some quick questions. We have a few more minutes.
Absolutely.
Very good. Just maybe from my behalf as well, my wife is a psychologist, and it's a really tricky part getting the technological part being involved of her work, and we haven't really come on an agreement. So how do you see from people on the discussion part, the mental part, and what would you see from if just answering, what should I bring home from the psychological perspective? What do you see the elements there from technological elements that you're working with?
Sure. Well, I very avidly believe that human beings want to care for themselves. And since we have a couple of minutes, I'll give you one story. So I was a complex cancer surgeon for a number of years at one point in my career and took care of thousands of cancer patients with bad problems. And when you do big operations, sometimes you have big complications. And I had one particular patient. I had several that I could tell a very similar story about, but one that I remember very clearly was a guy about 30 years old. He was malnourished. He was a drug addict. He had a mesothelioma, a big tumor surrounding his lung. I took it out, took his lung out. He developed an infection in the space. And I had to make a big opening in his chest that a nurse would come to his house and pack the dressings in and out of. And he was mortified and helpless and debilitated to begin with. And he said, how could I ever do this? I said, well, don't worry, I'll send somebody every day and then every other day, and we'll get over this. And so after about 6 months, he came back to my office one day and had fired his nurse. And I said, why did you fire your nurse? He says, because I know my body, I can do this better. And I've had countless experiences like that as a clinician. So the desire for individuals to care for themselves, I think, has been baked into our DNA evolutionarily. But again, we've emasculated that desire. The thing we have to remember, though, is that asking people to use technology that's out of the context of their normal lives, right? So if you're going to have to do a lot of extra things to interact with the technology, if you're going to have to take something on and off of your wrist every day, that's another act of adherence and compliance. If you're going to have to get on a keyboard and type in things that you did that day, that's another act of adherence and compliance and outside the normal context of your life. So I think for us to fully capitalize on this psychological desire to care for ourselves, we have to create technologies that sort of operate in the background. And we're actively working on that. I know many others are as well. But these things need to be collecting information from us more passively than actively. And I think once we do that, a couple of things will happen. People will obviously be more willing to use them because they don't have to do much. And the second is that we know from cognitive learning theory, another psychological concept, is that when people do things and they see a result, and this sounds like, I know this sounds intuitive, but when people do things and see a result, when they see the impact, that's called self-efficacy. They do it again and again and again. And so we have to also create technologies that people can have a visible impact from the use. And if we do that, they'll be using them repeatedly. So there's lots of lessons from psychology that we can bring home, as you say, in order to make the interface between humans and technology and healthcare more effective.
Very good. One more question about, as we're going to discuss also big data later on, health and well-being part of it. So how do you see Philips as one of the challenges which we're going to discuss in the panel is that a lot of data is captured, but it's not really personalized yet. It doesn't feel like it's really, you all have these technological elements.
Sure.
So how is Philips looking at that category?
Well, obviously at Philips, we're actively working on the problem as are many other companies. We have a large cloud-based platform where we're working globally to encourage healthcare providers to put the data on the cloud where we can actually then use it in more secure and more interesting ways. I will say a couple of things about the use of big data. One is that currently we have to be pragmatic. Most healthcare providers are still learning how to collect data. They're still learning how to leverage these large electronic health record platforms. And it's going to take a while, right? We just have to be pragmatic about that. But let's think more globally for the future. 40 years from now, what I see is all the barriers for sharing data eliminated, the ability to pull global data on your health, your wellness, your habits, your genetics, and so forth. And imagine if we had 3 billion of the world's 8 billion on that platform. It'd be the perpetual global trial that never stops. And we would be able to push insights back to you on a daily basis to change your life, to make you healthier, and to recover more quickly from illnesses. And that's the future, and that's the vision that I probably won't get to see myself, but I'm working every day to try to create with people like you.
Excellent. So it seems like all the innovations and maybe startup actors and from this category you're interested to hear more maybe of the solutions, what the field has to offer, especially here in the Finland Nordic area. Thank you so much. Let's give a big applause and continue the program. Thank you very much.